Hi folks, can I welcome everyone to the September meeting of the Audit, Assurance and Risk Committee of the Derry-and-Strabane District Council. We're going to begin with the member attendance and apologies.
Good afternoon, members. Alderman Keith Kerrigan. Alderman Ryan McCready. Alderman Nairi McMorris.
Here.
Councillor Raymond Barr.
Here, online.
Councillor Shauna Cusack. Councillor Caroline Devine.
Apologies for Councillor Devine.
Councillor Sean Fleming. Councillor Sean Harkin.
Here.
Councillor Conor Heaney.
Sure.
Councillor Christopher Jackson.
Sure.
Councillor Fergal Leonard.
On shot.
Councillor John McGowan.
Apologies.
Councillor Declan Norris.
Here.
Councillor Martin Riley.
Here.
Thank you, members.
Thank you, members. Agenda item number 3 now. I'm going to read the broadcast and statement. I would like to remind everyone present at the meeting in the Guildhall or in attendance remotely that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with our protocol. Due to your attendance at this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes, and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting, and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. A copy of the council privacy notice may be found at the council website, www.derrystrabane.com. Agenda item number 4, declarations of members' interests. Okay, none. Agenda item number 5. I don't believe I was contacted by anyone for a chairperson's business item. Is that correct? I do have one myself, and I've sent Paula a short proposal that I have. Look, I think the last couple of weeks, nobody in Derry or in our council district could be unaware of the chaos at Ebrington Square. I think there's a huge amount of public anger, a huge amount of public concern about what's been happening in the square and about the future of the square. There's been protests. There's possibly more protests planned. I think people have been very frustrated that in a cost of living crisis, £280,000 was paid out to different concerns at Ebrington Square. There's questions about the use of public square. There's questions about public events being held there over the next year. And I think that there's a lot of frustration that none of these decisions are being made locally, that they're being made at the executive office, and that the council, for example, isn't being consulted for any of this. I think we as a council need to be, seen to be acting in this and doing something about it. We want the situation resolved. I think we want to get a clear idea of how the square is going to be used. It is, after all, supposed to be a public square, and nobody should be able to veto events, whether that is a private entity in the square or the executive office. So I think that we need to have a meeting with the executive office as soon as possible to put our concerns to them, and also to try and understand how we got into this situation and how we're going to get out of it. So I want to make the proposal that we ask for an urgent meeting with those responsible for Ebrington Square at the executive office, and that we have that meeting with councillors and with council officers as well. So I'm hoping that we can support that today. As chair, can I ask for someone to second that?
Seconded, Councillor Barr.
Thank you, Councillor Barr. Would anyone like to discuss this? Councillor Jackson?
Good Chair, and I think we need to do more than be seen. They take action and try and resolve it. I think council need to ensure that there's a local say or there's a local view in relation to and there's a local solution to what you've described as a fiasco in Edmonton Square. In terms of a party, we've had numerous meetings with representatives of the Executive Office and from SAB. They express our frustration around how things have been handled. Now, and I know other political parties have likely done the same. I know both MLAs, Padraig Delargy and Ciara Ferguson, have been meeting around the clock to try and find some sort of a solution and try to find answers in terms of some of the mistakes and mismanagement of the events at the booking arrangement for events at Edmonton. So it is important that council, our council certainly have a role to play, and on that basis, we would support the motion, the proposal that you put forward. More than likely, it's going to be discussed further at full council, but this gives us an opportunity to do that. I do feel, and I think we need to broaden it out, because if we're meeting, by all means, with representatives from the Executive Office, but that should be extended to those with responsibility at SAB as well. So if that can, and I'm not entirely sure if it needs an amendment, but if we're organising a meeting with everybody who's responsible for Edmonton Square, we can't ignore the role of SAB in that as well. So, but in terms of council engagement, I'm working towards a solution. We feel that can only be positive. So on that basis, we fully support the proposal. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I'm happy to add that amendment if everyone's okay with it. Anyone else?
Chair Raymond.
Councillor Riley?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for bringing me in. I'd indicated I wanted to spin on this. Yeah, happy enough with the text that's on the screen, Chair, that you had proposed, and then also what Councillor Jackson had added to it. It makes sense if we are going to have a meeting. Let's get everybody around the table on this. I think there's clearly a huge frustration in the city and wider district and wider Northwest beyond the remit of our own council area. This square, provides a public space to so many different organisations, not just those who want to have concerts in the square, but also other people, other charities, other organisations who use that location as a meeting point. So there does need to be a clear and transparent process involved in how organisations and individuals can go about to use that space. And I think that it is something that was going to come up at full council anyway. I know I'd spoken to my group leader about this yesterday. We were saying we'd probably raise it at full council. Happy that it's been done here this afternoon. In that way, as Councillor Jackson has outlined, other elected representatives in the city and district have already made some public remarks and have had meetings and are seeking further meetings on all of this. But given the fact that this is public space in the council area, and the fact that it is it's so close to the Guildhall, there are many people who feel that the council already has responsibility for this location, which we in this chamber know isn't the case. But the vast majority of people out there feel that the council already is involved in this, and I think that it does make sense that we try and structure conversations going forward about how and who and what is the process for getting events to take place in such an important location, both historically but also for the future of the city, and given the fact that it has a knock-on effect on the other council asset that we have in that area in terms of St. Colum's Park. I think there were many reasons why this council should be taking the lead on putting together a solution to the problems that have unfolded over the past number of weeks and months. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. I've got Councillor Donnelly next. Before that, can we mark Alderman Kerrigan and Councillor Shauna Cusick present, please? Councillor Donnelly.
Chair, thank you. I'm not a member of this committee and can't vote or whatever on it, but this absolutely makes sense. It's already been said, there is a lot of concern, to put it mildly, out there. This smacks of incompetence, and there's public money being thrown about here willy-nilly like confetti at a time we have serious other issues in this council area, cost of living crisis and that. I think, you know, the more we see, the more we hear about this, the more ridiculous sound it is. So happy to support the recommendation, though I'm not a member of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Anyone else?
Chair.
Happy to move on. Alderman Kerrigan, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. I did have my name in the chat box, but I understand you're trying to keep an eye in the room and the chat box, so thank you, Chair. No, just supporting the motion, Chair. We are content with it there. Having a meeting will do no harm, and I do know that Gary Middleton has been working closely there to see what can be done in Aberdeen Square and trying to bring events. And we're trying to bring events into the city and into this district here and using that shared space. And as I say, it's there are major concerns out there in regards to where money's been spent. And so, and as has been stated by other members there, even in conversation there, there's almost an understanding from the general public that council are already involved in this and council are in charge of this site or whatever else. And it's not the case. So it's just get that meeting and having the discussion and seeing what can be done. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Kerrigan. Any other contributors for this? Okay, thank you for everybody's support on that. Thank you to Councillor Barr for seconding it. Can we move on now to matters arising from the open minutes of the previous meeting? Does anyone have an item to raise? Online? Just checking the box. Okay, if everyone's okay, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, financial statements for 2022-2023. And Alfie is going to take that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the report is to seek your approval of our financial statements, including the annual governance statement for the financial year 22-23. They're obviously a very detailed document attached in the appendix in that regard. Brian O'Neill from the Northern Ireland Audit Office is here to give you an update on the audit of the financial statements, which at this point is now very substantially progressed. Our audited accounts need to be signed by the 30th of September and published on our website also. So whilst it's a very comprehensive document, members, the two key elements are our outturn report and our governance statement, and you'll recall that those were approved by the relevant committees back in June 23 before the accounts were submitted for audit. So members, positively at this point there have been no changes to those positions reported. So I'm going to hand you over to Brian from the Northern Ireland Audit Office, and following that the recommendation in the paper is that you approve the financial statements, including our annual governance statement for the year end at 31st of March 23. Thank you.
Thank you, Alfie. Do you want to go ahead, Brian?
Yes, Chair, thank you, and thanks, Alfie, for that. Yes, as Alfie has highlighted, our audit is substantially complete. I know the paper in front of you says it's fully complete. We're still just going through our final internal review, highlighting just any outstanding queries that our review takes account of. We do hope to issue a final report to those charged with governance with yourselves, hopefully towards the end of this week, but maybe more likely at the start of next week. The report those charged with governance will highlight any findings from the audit, the status of the audit, and at this stage, as Alfie had said, we're content that the accounts as they stand at the minute are sufficient and enable, or the chief executive is able to sign the accounts as they stand at the minute. Just a couple of issues that the draft letter of representation, which the chief executive has to sign, we hope to get that issued at this stage. The audit certificate, which we are proposing. I suppose it'll come as no surprise to members that the audit certificate is similar to last year's audit certificate in relation to an emphasis of matter paragraph that we included in relation to the City of Derry Airport. Now, an emphasis of matter paragraph is not an audit qualification. It's just highlighting the fact that the issues surrounding the funding and the future funding relating to the City of Derry Airport. The accounts as they stand at the minute include a couple of references to the funding and the future of the City of Derry Airport. And we're of the view that this has to be highlighted in our audit certificate. So there will be a paragraph included in the audit certificate, which is a similar paragraph to previous year's audit certificates, just highlighting the fact of an emphasis of matter paragraph in relation to the future of the City of Derry Airport. That, Chair, they're the main things coming out of the audit. There's some minor disclosure issues still to be put through following a final review of the accounts, but in the main, we're content that the accounts can be signed as presented in front of you.
Thank you, Brian. Does any councillors or aldermen want to comment on the report? If we can have Brona Slevin, the independent member of the audit committee, I see that she has requested the opportunity to ask a few questions. So we'll go with Brona first. Go ahead, Brona.
Thank you so much, Chair. Appreciate that. I just want to say thank you to Alfie and his team for the accounts. There's a huge amount of work obviously goes into these every year, and I think they get more and more complicated as the years go by. Just three high-level questions and one specific, if I may. The first one would be in relation to the rate support grant, and as we all know, this has been, I'm going to use the word slash, year on year, which is creating difficulties across the province for raising money to complete the work for councils. And I was just going to ask Alfie for the latest position on that, and in particular for your own council, what work is being carried out in order to mitigate these circumstances. The second question would be in relation to the contingent asset. This we have talked about before, to do with the VAT case that's ongoing for a number of years, and just if we could get the latest position in relation to that. I know there has been some progress. And the third element is in relation to the rate space, as we know is critical to ensure the rates income is coming in. And I note from the accounts or from the annual government statement, reading broadly across that there's an issue around the schools appeal, the impact, if I could have some more understanding in relation to the impact that may have on the rates base and the income. And then finally, a specific question in relation to agency costs. I note that the agency costs for the year had gone up by approximately 93%, about 800,000, and I was wondering if Alfie could give us some more information on that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Brona. Alfie, do you want to take those now, and any other officers that where there's a relevant question, and then we can come back to councillors and aldermen?
Yep, thanks for the questions, Brona. So in relation to the first one, rate support grant, the latest position, it's obviously very disappointing. The grant in this year has been cut from 8.924 million to 4.9 million. And that's a substantial in-year issue that we've had to deal with. And thankfully, we have funds set aside in our financial contingency reserve to cover that. In terms of what we're doing about it, Council has obviously endorsed that we participate in the judicial review currently that Mid-Ulster Council has against the department in respect to that 22-23 cut. And I can advise that very substantial papers have been submitted into that process by this council. So we're waiting now on confirmation from barristers that we're allowed to participate in the case, which I think is scheduled for October. So I'm not sure what else we can do other than that, but hopefully those proceedings will assist reverse those cuts. The second one, the contingent asset in relation to the leisure VAT case. So at this point in time, as you've said, Brona, it's not an asset within our accounts. It's not a debtor. feedback is pretty positive in that the councils are going to get a positive outcome from the VAT case. The issue is that HMRC want to go through every individual line of what is a sporting activity and what is a leisure activity. So there's probably a few months' work to work through all that. But at the end of that, I think there'll be a positive outcome. It's really all about quantum as opposed to whether we'll win the case or not at this point in time. So that's the update in the leisure VAT case. The third point in relation to rate base, again, a critical issue, and that's why we've disclosed it as a financial risk within our governance statement. The reality is the non-domestic revaluation process does give rise to a number of appeals, and the 2020 process resulted in all the schools across Northern Ireland appealing their valuation, and because they represent such a substantial portion of our rate base, if those appeals are successful, it's a very significant risk which will be backdated until 31st of March 2020. So again, we have a substantial sum set aside in our financial contingency reserve. It's my understanding that those appeals are going to be concluded in the next few weeks. So at least we'll have the certainty around that at that point. And so we just have to see what comes out of that, and hopefully it'll not be too negative. The final point around agency costs, the accounts discloses that there was an increase in agency costs in the year. I think there's two elements to that. The first element is that the prior year, given it was a pandemic year, there was very little use of agency staff. So comparing it to the prior year will obviously give a false position in terms of normality. The second element is obviously during that time we were going through a very challenging rates process, and we weren't appointing any new permanent positions in the organisation. So short-term issues were being addressed through agency, and now that the rates process has been agreed, those have now all been formalised into proper staff appointments where the budget exists. So I hope that's addressed your queries, Brona. Happy to take any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alfie. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Alfie. Are you happy with that, Brona? Was there anything else you wanted to follow up on?
No, I'm very happy with that. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, maybe I just
go ahead, John.
Chair, Bruno, thanks for the question. It's John Kelpie here, and thanks for the question with regard to the rate support grant. And in addition to the voluminous work that's going on to prepare for the judicial challenge with regard to it, there is rarely a meeting goes by between the permanent secretaries and the chief executives of the councils, or indeed with the head of the civil service, where the issue of the rate support grant does not feature. As a matter of fact, it's almost become a standing item in those meetings, and the urgency and importance of addressing the issue is continuously stressed. So it's just to reassure that as well as, if you like, the detailed evidence-based work that is underway, there is continuous high-level exposure of the issue and the implications that it has on councils. A most recent meeting in regard to that being last week, where again the issue was brought to the attention of those who make the decisions.
Thanks, Sean. Councillor Heaney.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to Alfie and his team for all the work that's went on to this. I suppose a quick query, given that the Audit Office report says that these aren't fully finalised, that there's still some work to be done. Are we in a position to approve these today? If so, I'm happy to propose that we do approve them, but just to check that.
Clarify on that, Alfie.
Yep, we're in the position to approve these today unless there's a substantial issue which arises over the next week, which we're not anticipating at this point. But if there isn't, then the approval today will be sufficient to file our accounts.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments regarding the reports? Councillor Heaney, are you proposing we accept them? Does anybody want to second that?
Happy to second, Chair.
Okay, I think Councillor Leonard had his hand up first, but thank you, whoever that was online as well. Okay, thank you, Brian, thank you, Alfie, and thank you, Brona. To the next agenda item. It's the draft report to those charged with governance. And I think Brian from the Audit Office is Alfie. You going to do that, Alfie?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members, I think Brian has advised at this point the governance statement hasn't been issued, but the view is that there's been no significant issues identified. So whenever that governance statement is made available, we'll have to bring that in through this committee. So until we get that, there's not really much further update we can give on it today, unless Brian wants to say anything further on that.
Yes, Alfie, thank you through the chair. We're hoping to get our draft report, those charged with governance, to the chief executive either the end of this week or at the start of next week. And that draft report, those charged with governance, that'll include details of the audit, any findings, a draft letter for representation, which the chief executive has to sign, on our proposed audit certificate, which is a clean audit opinion with an emphasis of matter paragraph.
Okay, so thanks for that, and we'll await the official report. We'll move on now to item 9, internal audit reports, and Deborah's going to take that for us.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update members on the internal audit work carried out within Derry City and Strabane District Council in the period July 2023 to September 2023. The following audit work has been finalised recently: the internal audit of the Alley Theatre, the internal audit of Derry and Strabane Labour Market Partnership, and the internal audit of North West Region Waste Management Group. I commence with the internal audit of the Alley Theatre. The purpose of this review is to provide the Assurance, Audit and Risk Committee and senior management with an assurance on the adequacy and effectiveness of internal control over the Alley Theatre. This audit was carried out as part of the approved audit plan of work for 2023-24. Although the theatre was closed for a period during lockdown, operations have now returned to normal since restrictions were lifted. Internal audit reviewed the areas of income streams and cash handling, debt management, purchasing and procurement, stock control and performance management. This is the first time an audit of the Alley Theatre has been undertaken by the internal audit section since the formation of DCSDC, and as a result, internal audit have noted a number of areas where improvements to control processes could be made. Therefore, internal audit have made 20 recommendations to improve the control environment going forward. The key priority 1 recommendations relate to the following areas: calculation of the fees, purchase orders, invoicing, lodgements, procurement, stock control software and written procedures. Alley Theatre management have responded positively to these recommendations, and at the time of writing the audit report, several recommendations had already been implemented. A summary of all the recommendations made, together with management responses and implement dates, is included in the report. Next audit I'm going to talk about is the internal audit of Derry and Strabane Labour Market Partnership. The internal audit of Derry and Strabane Labour Market Partnership was requested by the Labour Market Partnership Manager to comply with the requirement within the Labour Market Partnership financial guidelines and funding agreement to have an internal audit carried out. This was agreed as part of the 23-24 internal annual audit plan of work approved by the Assurance, Audit and Risk Committee in March 23. The purpose of the review was to provide an independent professional opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of internal control, risk and governance processes over Labour Market Partnership. In relation to areas reviewed, internal audit reviewed the risk management, control and governance arrangements for Derry and Strabane Labour Market Partnership admin and operational expenditure, purchase and procurement and contract service level arrangements in place. While some control weaknesses were identified across the areas under review, internal audit is satisfied that overall there were adequate controls in place to manage risk within each area and that these controls were operating effectively. As a result, the audit has been given the assurance level of satisfactory, which is the highest level achievable. Within this report, 13 recommendations were made to improve the control environment going forward. The key priority 1 recommendations relate to the following areas: Labour Market Partnership standing orders, insurance for Labour Market Partnership, conflicts of interest procedure, Labour Market Partnership annual report, reporting to Council, written approval of expenses from Department, Central Government Department, improving controls around purchase orders in relation to time frame for completion of purchase orders, completeness of purchase orders, authorisation of purchase orders, appropriate procurement and grant processes. The Labour Market Partnership Manager has responded positively to these recommendations. Again, a summary of all recommendations made together with the management responses and implementation dates is included in the report. The third audit that undertaken in this period is internal audit of North West Region Waste Management Group. The purpose of this review is to provide the Assurance Audit and Risk Committee and senior management with an assurance on the adequacy and effectiveness of internal control over the audit area of North West Region Waste Management Group. Internal audit reviewed the North West Region Waste Management Group expenditure, income including credit control, budgetary control and governance arrangements in place. Internal audit is satisfied that the internal systems and controls are adequate and were operating effectively at the time of the audit, and as a result the audit received a satisfactory assurance rating, which is the highest rating available. We made 5 recommendations as a result of this audit in the following areas: authorisation of purchase orders, North West Region Waste Management Group date stamping of invoice, registration by Central Accounts section, authorisation of invoices, timeliness of payment of invoices and recharge payments from non-member councils. Of the 2 recommendations made in last year's internal audit report, current year testing showed that 1 had been fully implemented and 1 in the area of purchase orders had not been implemented. Internal audit again noted that management have responded positively to these recommendations. A summary of all recommendations made, together with management responses and implementation dates, is included in the report. Other internal audit work undertaken. Internal audit continues to be available across the Council to carry out reviews of financial governance and operational arrangements as required, working with management to ensure that they've considered risks and controls associated with any new or changed processes. There are no implications as a result of this business, and happy to take any members' comments or questions on the internal audit reports. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Deborah. Councillor Heaney.
Chair, I don't know whether I need to declare interest here or not, but just to do so anyway, just in my work in the employability sector, I would work regularly with the labour market partnerships, so just to declare that.
Thank you, Councillor Heaney. Noted. Anyone with questions or comments for Deborah? Councillor Jackson.
Cormac, Chair, and thanks to Deborah for the report. And I suppose there's not a question, but it's more of a comment. They say that it's a positive step in terms of particularly in the case of the Alley Theatre, where it has never went through an internal audit before, and it's great to see that recommendations have been or improvements have been recommended, and that there's a willingness within the management team to fulfil those recommendations and make the improvements that are necessary. And I think this should be standard practice. There shouldn't be an element of council, particularly a key element in terms of service provision, that isn't audited regularly. So there's, I suppose, the recommendations that have been highlighted and detailed within the report show the benefit of carrying out the audit, and it's a very worthwhile piece of work, and it's something that I suppose I just wanted, on behalf of our party, to commend not only yourselves but for those within the Alley Theatre and the Labour Market Partnership and the North West Regional Waste Management Group, everybody who was involved in the process, because we should always strive to make improvements and to ensure that, particularly in relation to governance, that any steps that need to be taken are taken, because and in terms of everything that's contained within the report, on a personal basis, I've been really impressed with it. So I just want to thank yourselves for carrying out the piece of work. And hopefully, maybe there is a question in relation to that. In terms of the numerous recommendations that have been highlighted, will there be an update to a relevant committee in relation to the progress of those recommendations? But it's the fact that that they've been identified as part of the audit process, from our perspective, shows the benefit of carrying out the audit in the first place. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Do you want to respond, Deborah?
The internal audit section of the council has finite resources, and as a result, we have taken the decision that we follow up a full internal audit only if the overall audit opinion is improvement needed or major improvement needed. So because the Alley Theatre has been awarded the audit opinion of satisfactory, there won't be a full follow-up audit undertaken. But what would happen is that the next time that Alley Theatre would be reviewed by ourselves, we would include that as part of the audit work in that case. And in the meantime, then the action plan at the back of that report is a useful tool for management, and they work through it to implement it. Thank you.
Also, could I just say so? Also, the recommendations should now feed into the risk management process. So they'll be picked up in the risk registers. And, that's the way then that management have it's over out of the business now but it's, as Deborah said, it's only if it's improvement needed. But we would, unless you want us, if the committee decides, look, we want another follow-up audit carried out, even though it is a satisfactory, we can do that also. But as Deborah says, it's a finite resource, and we sort of move on to our next audit on the audit needs assessment.
Councillor Jackson.
No, and I wasn't suggesting a full audit, a full follow-up audit. I was, and I fully accept that it's the management's responsibility to ensure that the recommendations that have been identified by the audit are completed. So I wasn't expecting a full audit report to come back, but I was maybe the question was directed towards the relevant directors that will there be updates in relation to improvements or the recommendations that have been identified?
John, want to respond to that?
Yeah. Chair, just if you want me to pick up on that one, I think it's that the internal audit team have essentially done their job. It's now passed back to respective management. And I think in this occasion and on other occasions, it would be appropriate that an update report would be brought back through the parent committee in due course with regard to the improvement actions that have been suggested. So that would either be part of the service improvement plan or a separate standing report. And I think each of the directors and myself will reflect on which is the best opportunity to do that. But I think probably bringing it back into the parent department is the appropriate place for that to be dealt with. Thank you, Chair.
Everybody happy with that, Councillor Jackson? Rona Slevin, our independent audit committee member, I see you wanted to ask the question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Deborah, for the reports. My question is in relation to the Northwest Region Waste Management Group, and on page 25 of 125 of the pack, there's a recommendation there, a priority 1 recommendation in relation to purchase orders, and it states on the report that this is a 21-22 recommendation with the new estimated implementation date of the end of July of this year, and I was just seeking information from the relevant manager as to whether or not that has actually been implemented at this stage. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Brona. Are you able to respond, Karen?
Yeah, I think I will bring in the Head of Environment. Conor Cannon is online and he's ready to answer that particular query.
Yeah, Chair, happy to take the question. There's a small team of 2 within the group, and during the period covered by the audit, as mentioned, both had been off on long-term sick, and the admin processes were covered by other staff who was not familiar with the processes required. Since that, the staff have now returned to work, and we are now fully compliant with the requirements in terms of purchase orders and the other findings as set out in the report. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Conor. Brona, was that okay for you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Conor.
Okay, any other comments or questions for Deborah? Okay, well, thank you, Deborah, for the report, and we'll move on to agenda item number 10, planning investigation, and Denise is going to take that for us.
Thank you, Chair.
Members, the purpose of this report is to present to you the findings and conclusions of an investigation that was undertaken in relation to concerns raised by 3 elected members in relation to a specific historic planning application. So back in February, 3 elected members met with the Chief Executive and senior officers outlining concerns with a planning application dating back to January 2009 and a subsequent application submitted in June 2015. Following this meeting, the elected members contacted the Chief Executive to detail 3 concerns relating to the case and requested that an investigation be initiated to determine the facts around the issues. The 3 concerns that were raised by elected members are detailed in the report, member, there for your information. When the concerns were received, the Chief Executive, along with the 3 elected members, agreed that I would be requested to lead the investigation in accordance with our Council's Raising Concerns policy, and in particular Section 2 of the Counter Fraud, Raising Concerns and Anti-Bribery policy. And the scope of the investigation would be on the 3 areas that are detailed there in the report. So an investigation team was set up consisting of myself and James, the Assurance Manager. As part of the investigation, members, we met with all the relevant key personnel and reviewed all the available documentation in relation to the issues raised. And the conclusions, along with any recommendations that we did make, are highlighted in the report for members to note. So happy to take any comments or questions on the report, members. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Any members with questions or comments on the report? Councillor Donnelly.
Chair, thank you. Chair, in my naivety at the time, when this was narrowed down to 3 specific points, I imagined that this would deal with a lot of other issues, which it subsequently didn't. I found it, in hindsight, I never thought that somebody investigating something and were told aspects of the same incident would say that's outside the remit, or we're not going into that. So in hindsight, but the reality behind this case is that there was a planning application, and the applicant was made to jump through a lot of hoops that aren't normal. Separate demolition reports, costings and that. And it was suggested that it would be refused, and it went to the PAC. And then a mysterious letter apparently went to the PAC withdrawing it. That letter has never ever been seen. I don't know if it disappeared. Probably didn't disappear because of the applicant and the agent's attitude. It was never sent in the first place. So it was deemed refused by law, I think is the terminology that they used. And after that, a couple of years later, a similar, almost identical in many ways, application went in, and it sailed through. There's serious issues with this case, and that's what I was trying to bring up. And I assume that the other 2 elected representatives, one who is no longer elected, we're trying to do. And I know as a result of that investigation, the applicant and the agent were met, and they raised serious concerns outside the 3 concerns that this investigation was narrowed down to. And both the applicant and the agent are here today. There was a piece of text from a very lengthy document, which was, in their words, cherry-picked to justify the allegation that it was withdrawn. In my opinion, Chair, the report, it does not address the key concern raised by members of the public, that the application was treated differently to that which was subsequently approved, despite the project being practically identical in nature. I do welcome the decision to bring before the committee and publish investigation reports on public interest concerns raised under the Council's 2020 Counter Fraud, Whistleblowing, Anti-Bribery policy. It does raise the question of what the policy and procedure for investigating such concerns before 2020. What were these cases, and where they are now needed to be revisited to assure members that they were robustly investigated. Generally, the council's approach to determining the facts around public interest concerns raised by the public is to be welcomed, but it does raise a concern over consistency when compared with another case, which coincidentally I am due to meet the auditor tomorrow over, where the facts are clear but have not been addressed by senior officials. This was a narrow investigation. You know, if somebody came out to your home to look at a fault and one wall and seen something wrong with the roof, it's ludicrous to say we're not dealing with that because if say for instance a police investigation was dealing with somebody about allegations and during that something was said that meant that merited to be investigated, it would be ludicrous to say we're not going into that. I'm not here to question you about that. I think, Chair, this report leaves a lot more questions than it does answers. And I think it hasn't addressed, you know, and talk to consultants that were employed by council. You know, them consultants would have been, and I would have imagined, being dealing with 3 issues here rather than the bigger picture. You know, council has a duty to investigate when, and I have no doubt, having talked to the applicant, that there was serious concerns raised outside of these 3. Has council taken them on board? Have they said, well, we need? They haven't said we'll look into that because we have a duty in the interests of assuring the public. It hasn't happened, and it's very frustrating. You know, council 2020 counter fraud whistleblowing anti-bribery policy, under which this case was investigated, does not require councillors to sponsor anyone raising a public interest concern. I.e., it doesn't have to come from councillors, but in this case, 3 councillors from 2 different parties and myself had serious concerns, and we in fact did that. When those other members of the public were in and raised concerns, they should have been taken down and they should have been addressed. It didn't happen. So therefore, irrespective of this report's findings on issues raised by councillors, the complainant is raising a serious concern of a professional and ethical nature, which the investigators acknowledge was not examined because it, quote, was not within the remit of the investigation, page 114. This leaves unaddressed a serious concern over professional conduct. This is not the fault of the person raising the concern, particularly if the scope of the investigation was not agreed with them. And I can confirm it wasn't. Moreover, when a concern is raised as part of the investigative process, but it is not appropriate to ignore it simply because it was not part of the initial remit. To do so undermines the effectiveness of council's counter-fraud, whistleblowing, anti-bribery policy and public trust in the planning system. There's something really wrong with what we have, this whole case, and unless it's addressed, then it's not. The public and professional people out there are not going to have any confidence. Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Donnelly. And I don't know if you have a proposal. I know you're not a member of the committee, but if there's, if you do, you know, we can discuss that.
I will have one, Chair, through you, beg your apologies, through you, that there will be a proposal at full council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Does anyone else have comments or questions? Could I ask Mark to come up here just for a second to sort out the screen there, because I can't see the chat box. Thank you. Anybody in the chamber with a comment or question? Brona, did you have a question?
No, Chair, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Jackson?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I suppose there is quite a lot of information contained within the report, and I'm want to thank Councillor Donnelly for raising it. And I know, I'm not too sure if I should declare an interest as a member of the committee whenever the decision was taken, but it is highlighted within the report that there was members of the committee that weren't, that didn't have all the information that would be relevant to this application. And I think it is worth pointing out that there's no accusation level towards any member of council in relation to it. But it does seem that members took a decision on an application that was in front of them, and we didn't have all the information that was available at the time, and that is concerning as a member of the planning committee. And although there's a very detailed report that's in front of us today, it is worrying that that from one of the complainants' point of view, who's a member of this council, they're still not satisfied with, or it provides, I think it was Councillor Donnelly's words, that it poses more questions than answers. So on that basis, I'm extremely concerned, but we'll await a proposal that'll come with full council, and I could have conversations with Councillor Donnelly in between times. But I think it's in this council's interests to ensure that there's full confidence in the process, and I suppose that responsibility is something that we take extremely seriously, and you would hope the council officers and have the exact same view. So if there's anything that we can do to provide clarity and to instill confidence in the process, then we're completely up for that. So there's I know, again, I'm disappointed that the Councillor Donnelly hasn't got the assurances that he was seeking, and we sort of we'll eagerly anticipate any proposal that's coming forward at full council, and it can be discussed further then. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Anyone else? Online? Yeah, look, I'll just say myself as chair, thank you, Councillor Donnelly, for bringing those comments. And if the complainants aren't satisfied with the report and the investigation, then we need to go further. So I will be looking forward to your proposal at the full council meeting, and we'll be happy to support it as well. I think we do have to have full confidence in the processes that the council have, and if they're not there, well, then we need to ask more questions and have more investigations and make sure things are being done right. So thank you again for that. Are we happy to move on? Okay. The next items, item 11, 12, 13, 14, are all for information. We have officers here ready to take questions if there are any. Does anyone want to comment on any of those items? I have Brona. Go ahead, Brona.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions on item number 14, please, the Annual Performance Report 22-23. The first question is in relation to an update, if possible, on any progress against the performance measures against other councils. I know that was in train at the last meeting, and I was just looking for an update on that. And the second is in relation to the planning applications and the 78 weeks that's being reported against the 30 weeks, which is the performance indicator, I think, set down by the department. Just some more information on that would be helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Brona. Denise, do you want to respond? James, would you like to respond?
Is that
to Brona?
Brona, I spoke with the lead Democratic Services Officer earlier today, and work on the improvement objectives takes place alongside the rates process each year, and the improvement objectives are agreed via the senior leadership team and are reflected in the Directorate delivery plans. Under the legislation, we are generally required to have an improvement plan approved by the 30th of June each year. However, as this was an election year, the deadline was changed to the 30th of September. This recognises a period of political sensitivity that operates prior to an election. Consultations are not recommended in this period. Also, due to the election, Council suspended meetings at the end of March and the annual meeting was held in June. Normally, consultations are concluded by the end of May, start of June.
Thank you, James. Brona, are you happy with that? Any other additional comments?
Yeah, if I may, that was actually a question, James, that I'd asked earlier of James in relation to a consultation period. But I guess in relation to the other two questions, in relation to any performance measurement against other councils and the planning performance indicator, it's what I was looking for as well. Thank you, Chair.
Karen, do you want to take that?
Yeah, and through you, Chair, members, just in terms of the processing times of the major applications, you can see in the report that during 22-23, we issued 2 complex legacy applications, which were 565 weeks, which are included in the overall end of year statistics. There was a number of complex major applications, including an application subject to judicial review, and decision had to be retaken on 3 applications, which had to be referred to DFI, which caused the delays. And I think, members, we are engaging with the Department for Infrastructure as part of their review of the wider planning system to see how these types of cases can be reflected in statistics so that we can provide members with more robust information in terms of applications that may, for want of a better word, skew the overall performance, but certainly happy to take any further comments that any members have in relation to that.
Thanks, Karen. Any further questions for Karen, or is that okay, Brona?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would welcome that look at the statistics, because it does skew it, and it does maybe reflect the reality whenever you're reviewing those. The other thing was just in relation to measuring against the other councils and how that's coming along. Thank you, Chair. In relation to the general wider issues, I don't mean in relation to the regularity ones. They're obviously, all councils are preparing those, but just in relation to other performance indicators. Thank you, Chair.
Rona, could you just repeat the last part of your question there? We're just trying to figure out which officer could respond.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Chair. I was asking really how the work was going. I think the councils were working with APSI as a body to determine a way forward in comparing other performance indicators rather than outside of the regularity ones that are already laid down by the department, and just to see how that as a piece of work is progressing across all the councils. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, just through you, I'm happy to pick that point up. Brona, we would normally do those comparators through our annual service directorate service improvement plans, where we would benchmark across the work of other councils and use the APSI data there. But I'm happy to pick that point up and have a look at that and see how we better report on that.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Brona. Are there any other questions from members for any of for items 11, 12, 13 or 14? If not, item 15 isn't confidential, and I just want to give our IT department the opportunity to move us out of the live stream. So we're going to move into confidential now, if that's okay with members.